welcome to webinar 3. We're just going to get started right away. So on behalf of myself and the team, oops, I think I skipped one. Sorry. On behalf of myself, Sudie, Adria, and Maria, we're happy to have you back. This is one of our favorite parts of the clinic, which is, sorry, there's a delay in advancing these slides. Sudie, I'm sorry, it won't seem to work. Could you go ahead and advance it?
Give it another go. It might be because I was clicked on something else. There we
There
go.
we
It
go.
was me.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So just we're kind of getting here to the end of the clinic, believe it or not. Like the time has really flown by. So today we're focused on challenge stories, and then we will meet again after the holidays for our last all-day session on January 16th, and you'll be preparing and presenting your capstone for our next and last session in January, and you'll hear more about that today. And then you will be in coaching. Your team will have access to a coach between January and September. And I'm very happy to say that our coaches are actually here with us today, or some of them. And they're here just to listen and begin to hear kind of what your challenges are and what's happening. And so thank you to our coaches who are joining us today. All right. So today's session is really focused on the issues and challenges that are arising in your programs. Thank you to those of you who have sent us challenge stories. We're really going to be trying to address those world issues using our collective knowledge, or as we like to call it, the hive mind, to help brainstorm solutions and possible approaches to addressing some of the challenges you're having as you roll out your IET programs. We are going to be spotlighting 4 stories today. Many of the challenges you shared have, I think many of you are have overlapping or shared challenges, I should say. So even if your group is not talking, let's really listen well because I think it could really apply to many of you, each of these stories, or could be coming down the pike. So today we're going to be hearing from Bassett Adult School, Roland Adult and Community Education, Fremont Union, HSD Adult School, and also we're going to be looking at the Napa Valley Adult Ed challenge story. They unfortunately couldn't join us, but their challenge story was really good, and we just thought we would want to bring it up here and talk about it. And everybody will have access to the recording, so Napa Valley will definitely be able to hear the conversation that we're having, and also your advice for them. So, how do the challenge stories work? Let me kind of go over the format here. We will, to facilitate our discussion in our group, each of the 4 groups is going to have approximately 15 minutes. So we will read the challenge story and the questions that they provided to, and then we will ask the agency to provide about 4 minutes. It's not a lot of time of additional context, just so we can really understand a little bit more about their situation, their program, what the problem or the issue is that's arising for them. And then we're going to turn it out to the group to ask you to ask any additional questions, right, that you need to clarify and understand the issue or their context, right? So we want to lead with questions, and then we will have a discussion and ask the group, again, tapping the hive mind, to offer new ideas, potential solutions, things that might have worked in your program, to help the team that's presenting, address and think about how they might come up with some solutions to these challenges. We may not be able to kind of cover everything there. As I said, each group only has 15 minutes, but please use the chat, and also we can continue the conversations in Moodle. Okay, so first up is our group from Bassett. So that is Ariana, Madeline, and Ribbentrop is on the team, but I don't think he could join us today. So Ariana and Madeline, are you guys here? Do I see Ariana and Madeline here?
They're both here.
Oh yeah. Hi. Can we hear you, Madeline? I don't think we can hear Madeline.
I heard you for a second right before you hit mute again, Madeline. And then you cut out.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and read the challenge story from Bassett. Madeline, hopefully we can work on getting your sound up
Can you hear
and
me?
yeah.
Okay, I figured it out.
Yay! Welcome. And
Hello.
is Ariana here?
Yeah, I believe she is. So I think I might speak for the group just because
Okay.
this is more of the admin issue that we're getting
Okay.
in implementing the program. So I think I have a little bit more
Okay.
knowledge of it.
Okay. Well, we want to encourage Ariana too. I do see her here on the bottom of my screen. So let me first read Bassett's challenge story, and then we're going to turn it over to Madeline and Ariana to provide a little bit more context. So Um, their story is really about encouraging persistence and also creating some fairness in their program. So they write, our main challenge in implementing the IET program is designing a structure that keeps students enrolled and attending regularly while accommodating their work and family obligations. We are exploring different scheduling options and instructional approaches, such as co-teaching or alternating teaching, but we're concerned about maintaining equity for both IET and non-IET students. Our goal is to find a supportive, stable, and fair model that encourages consistent participation and helps learners succeed without overwhelming them or the instructors. And their two specific questions are, how do we design a schedule that increases access without placing additional strain on learners or instructors? And how do we strengthen our instructional model in a way that supports everyone without creating inequities? So, Madeline and Ariana, can you just provide us with a few minutes of additional context and kind of more about what what exactly is the issue here? What's the strain that's happening?
I think for us, especially in our community, a lot of our students are already working. So they're coming to us to get a better job in the sense. So they're picking in, do I keep my full-time job? Do I make it part-time? Do I choose a class? How consistent am I going to be in taking my class? Especially now, if we add the IET model, there's two classes. You have to take the ESL component and their CTE class. Sometimes there's a lot of our students are right after class, they're going straight to work or they're coming straight from work. So sometimes they're already tired. Taking additional time is just a little bit too much for
Yeah,
us. For them, not for us, but for them.
yeah,
And then for the other one is we talked about having the two teachers in the classroom. So how can we make sure that, not only our IET students are learning, but also our non-IET, we're not taking away from their class time. Because we talked about, especially in our HVAC, that's one that we really want to make it for IET. How do we make sure that if we do the two teachers at the same time, we were thinking about having the teacher teach during the lab time, but we're taking lab time away from those IET students. But then we don't want to force the non-IET students to spend more extra time if they don't need to.
okay. Those are very thorny issues, and I think a lot of folks here are probably wrestling with similar issues. Jennifer had a question about what type of program it was, and you mentioned HVAC. Was there another one that you're also doing with IET?
And then our CNA.
CNA. And are these issues arising for both in both HVAC and CNA?
Yes, because
Okay.
and especially in our CNAs, they do some time here and then they go to their clinic site because we they do their clinic site at the same during the same program time.
Hmm.
So then they do some classing here, do their clinic site, and then they go to work.
Hmm. Okay. So let me first thank you, Madeline. Ariana, do you want to add any additional context, or is there anything you want to, say before we turn it over for questions?
No, I think Maddie covered it pretty well.
Okay. So I want to turn it out to the group now. Jennifer kicked us off by asking what were the actual IET training programs. What questions do you guys have for Bassett just to help you understand this or understand the issue?
Um, I want to know what was the plan? Did they get together with the ESL folks and the content teachers? Did they have a plan and did they have an understanding of uh, what should be in the plan so that it would not cause any inequities and uh, take care of the needs of all of the students? Those
Okay,
that need more support as well as those that can do fairly well.
right.
Did they do any of that kind of planning?
Right. So Kathy, that's a good question. Who's involved in the planning of the model and kind of how best to structure it, I think is what Kathy's asking.
So, we really, so we're still in like in the beginning stages of the IET, so we're still kind of figuring it out.
Hmm.
So,
Right.
um, I
That's
think
fair.
yeah, I think that's where we kind of stop is like, okay, what exactly should we do? How should we actually structure it to make it better for all the students?
Yeah.
I think that's where we're struggling at the most.
Yeah. And that's, so you guys are at the beginning of trying to figure out like what is the design of our program? Like, are
Mhm.
we using co-teaching and alternating teaching? What's the number of hours? What's the days? So there's some questions here. What's the time commitment you're looking at from the students and connected to that, Jennifer's asking how many hours are required.
So for the HVAC class, so that one it's a full semester and they go Monday through Thursday. In the morning they go from 8 to 1. In the evening they go 4:30 to 9.
And that's just for the training component?
Yes, that is just
Okay.
for the training component.
Okay. And to get to uh, Connor, I'm not sure if that question answered that. That's just the training component, right? So
Mhm.
the question of when they're going to be doing the ESL and how they're going to be doing it. So Connor, I'm not sure if that answered your question. So, and then Graciella's kind of asking, what's the breakdown of the ESL to non-ESL? So trying to understand what that student population looks like. Do you know?
It's very small. So our ESL students, so in our CNA, it's a little bit higher. So but it's about I would say 70 non-ESL, 30 ESL. Once we get into the HVAC class, it's way less. So that's why when it comes to the inequity of it, you know, it's 4 or 5 ESL students compared to 30 non-ESL students.
Right. So um, given that a majority of the students are non-ESL, right? Thinking about
Mhm.
how do you design an IET program, I think I just want to try to rephrase this, Madeline, and let me sure
Mhm.
I'm getting it right. How do you design the IET program in a way that gives the ESL students what they need to be successful in the course, but doesn't put additional demands on the non-ESL students, or in this case, additional time demands on already busy ESL students, right? So it's like a very fine line. So, Sudie's asking a question. Are you thinking you'll offer the entire program in person, or is there flexibility to do some of it online?
So actually, I slowly it's been popping in my head. I think some online would probably benefit them a little bit, especially when it comes to the terminology. Do what like a hybrid version, I think would probably be the best way. Do 1 week in person, 1 week off, 1 week on person, 1 week off. Um, so maybe that's going to be hopefully what we want to do.
Yeah. So, and a couple of other people in the chat are adding that, and Jacqueline's suggesting, yes, you can add some asynchronous work or front load the content, right? So more of a hybrid model. And Jacqueline, are you thinking to kind of meet those ESL needs, those language needs? Is that where you're going with that? Can you unmute, Jacqueline?
Sorry, yes, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh-huh.
so we are currently building out our CNA course. We're finishing up our intro class, and ours is all ESL students. And so in the CNA, it's only 2 nights a week, and I'm this day for them to watch videos, kind of front load the content
Mhm.
in for what we're going to be doing.
Got it. Well, so Madeline, Jacqueline is doing a CNA, so you guys should be swapping emails with each other right
Yes.
now, and anybody else who's doing a CNA.
Yeah.
Mr. Farrow, do you want to come off mute and share what you were sharing in the chat?
Yeah, sure. So we have a competency-based, I'm sorry, I hear a lot of feedback.
Yeah, Madeline, if you
Oh, sorry.
can mute when you're not talking, thanks. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Farrow.
I get a little overwhelmed with the noise. So we have a competency-based education program that is offered in English and Spanish in agriculture. It's agriculture upskill is basically what it is we want to reach our students who are for all intents and purposes, working in low skill, no skill, and build up the skills they already have, validate those, and then really kind of be that channel to send them to the next place. Right now, it's offered in English and Spanish. We looked at the opportunity for IET, so we can offer, instead of 10 different courses, 5 in English, 5 in Spanish, offering just 5 in English with an IET, ASL, ESL, something else, course, but it's marrying that competency-based education program, which is they work on it themselves. They schedule a time to come in and do assessments or to study or to practice with an ESL model where they're coming to class, and then what do those look like? And I haven't seen a lot of the conversation for competency-based education and a in-person ESL. And so I think we're getting closer to something, but I just wanted your coaching on that.
Okay, well, thanks, Mr. Farrow. We will let's stick with Bassett for a minute. I don't think they have well, everybody's got a competency-based model, I should say, in CTE, right? Because that's the whole thing about career technical, is that it's all about like being able to do the job. But let's put a pin in that for a minute, Mr. Farrow, and see if we can get back to it. But I think this idea of that you're kind of getting at, which is how do you, meet the needs of different students, right? Whether they be ESL or high level, low level in this model, right? Along with the competency based. Great. Okay.
I'm not talking about competencies like student learning outcomes. I'm talking about a model for teaching, which is that divorcing time from learning.
Got it.
And that's what
Got
we
it.
have here.
Okay, interesting. All right. Well, that's interesting and it's good to know like if any of you are interested that Mr. Farrow is somebody that you might be able to reach out to find out more about how they're doing that there and how it might work within an IET model. We just have another minute or two for Bassett. So I just want to see a lot of you are talking about hybrid models. Connor's talking about the model that they have, 2 days in person, 1 day online. Are there other ideas for Bassett about how to address, other than hybrid or moving apart online, are there other ideas about how to address the needs here? Connor?
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I think the hybrid does help, right? Because at least, hey, I have childcare. I can kind of do it if like my child's next to me from home. So like some of our students have mentioned that works, but it sounds like it's also a lot of hours, a lot of commitment. I'm wondering, could there be an option for those with families like it takes twice as long, but then like the coursework is spread out? Because that's a lot of hours for Monday through Thursday, like morning through night. Like if I'm like a working mom, I can't do that, even if it is, like that's going to be hard. I have work, I have different things. If it was like 20 hours a week, I could still have a 20, 25 hour a week job and be able to do it. So we have that with one of our CNA or one of our medical interpreters. It's like twice as long, but it's a lot of our working parents who do it.
Yeah. Connor, I really appreciate that. That's one thing that we definitely did at LaGuardia when we rolled out our IETs is we changed the length of the program with the understanding that students, the intensivity was a little bit less and we also needed to push in that language lift, right? So I do really appreciate that playing with the calendar is a great idea. The other thing to think about is building in, somebody said front loading, I think, as part of their IET, but one thing to think about is building in like a bridge, like a few weeks of a bridge model, right? Contextualized work for those ESL students, right? Now, the bridge is an IET, but it's kind of an on-ramp and it can give them kind of a head start when they do get into that more fast-paced career technical. And the other thing I want to mention, just in my own experience before we move on to the next group, is at LaGuardia, when we started digging around on how were our students doing in our CTE classes, like what was our completion rate for like our non-adult ed, non-ESL students, we found that our completion rates were pretty poor, actually. A lot of students were struggling with the career technical content, even if they weren't like considered adult ed students. They were really struggling with the pace and the level of the content. I'm not sure if you guys have that in your CTE programs, but what we found is through by making the programs IET and having a partial co-teaching model, right? So that all the students, whether they were ESL and adult ed, were benefiting from the language lift that our adult ed teachers were pushing in a co-teaching model. Our completion rates and our job placement rates went up for everybody, like drastically from like 50% to like almost 90%. So we opened access, but we also ended up having many more successful students that would have been considered like the traditional or the mainstream students. Graciela, you have your hand up.
On that note, so you're talking about opening up the IET to not just ESL students, but maybe literacy, correct? So it's more of a literacy component. Is that, I guess I've heard of that and we've talked about that for our CTE because exactly what you said are the completion rates, even for non-ESL, just because they don't speak the language doesn't mean that they have the literacy skills to be able to access the CTE content. But I guess my question to your comment is for a student to be in that supportive class or that IET, that additional class, they don't have to be ESL then? Or how do you, I guess on a management side, do they CASAS test? What is the mechanics behind all of that? Or how do you justify, or how do you bring that I'm trying to think because I know I've had this
Yeah,
question from
right.
our admin a
So,
lot.
so Graciela, I'm going to respond to that, but then I want to go to the next story because Roland's story really is about this. It's one of the questions is like, how low can you go, basically, and like who's an adult ed student. But what I want to say, Graciela, about that at LaGuardia again, and I'm talking about the programs that I was a director of. We didn't use the CASAS, we used the TABE, but it does, you guys, it could have been the CASAS. We assessed everybody because adult ed students come in multiple doors. There's a lot of adult ed students who come in through CTE and they get labeled as CTE students, but actually when they're assessed, they are adult ed students. They just came in a different door, right? And so what we found when we did that was a lot of our students were, you know, technically in, as Sudie puts, either literacy, numeracy, oral and listening comprehension, whatever the tests are, right? They could be deemed as adult ed students, right? And so we had a lot at LaGuardia of like 1.5 generation students in our programs, or students who came here as young people from other countries so that they were near native speakers, but their reading and writing skills were not at that level, right? And um, so anyway, I just want to say that if you guys start thinking about, when you're having ESL and non-ESL students at a certain point, right, the language lift for students who have language and literacy and certainly numeracy needs can be similar and can kind of help all of them. So, but with that, I see the chat's really good. I hope you guys are following along. Sudie's offering lots of good information in here. Thank you, Sudie. The no wrong door approach, exactly. And Juan, thank you. A lot of students are in our CTE programs. I'm just going to say this again, that are adult ed students. They just came through a different door. So we do need to move on to Roland. Thank you, Sudie, but let's keep that chat going because this is great conversation. Roland's story really connects to what we're talking about. So for Roland, who's here from Roland? Jacqueline,
There's
Catherine, and
Jacqueline,
Mitchell.
Catherine, and Mitchell. I think they're all here. Awesome,
Awesome.
Roland.
Yay.
All
Thank
right,
you,
well, let's look
guys.
at the Reader's Digest abridged and condensed version of their challenge story. We face challenges helping English language learners or ELL students succeed in fast-paced healthcare training program. Blending English language support with technical healthcare skills is difficult, and our students often struggle with the transition. We're working to find fair ways to screen and support students as they move into the CNA program, aiming to balance strong preparation with access and equity without creating unnecessary barriers for motivated adult learners. The questions here are what CASAS levels truly reflect readiness for CNA programs, and how do we implement this without excluding students who could succeed without additional scaffolding? And number two, how do we build a pathway that maintains access and equity while still meeting regulatory expectations and ensuring students are prepared for the demands of clinical work? Team Roland, anything you would like to add to this narrative?
I think just to so you know where we're at in this whole process. We had started the planning, and then we had a director change. So I came in as director at Race in July. So I kind of took on what was already happening, and so Jackie and Kathy, who are here, were a part of that along with others to start the process. So when we opened up this school year, we had our first course, which is our introductory course. And so these students, we have a number that are going to continue on into the clinical class next semester. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. And so this is our first batch of students, our first cohort. And so I think that's where the challenge piece comes in, as we're looking at our progress with the students and their needs. And so that I think that's where this is really stemming from. And so I think it's gotten us to kind of look at instruction across the whole system as well when we look at ESL. And so that's some of the work that we're doing system wide. But that's kind of where we're at. So I'll let Kathy and Jackie jump in as well.
Thank you.
Um,
Kathy, Jackie?
Hello? Oh,
I can hear you.
okay. Um, I think part of the big problem has been, this idea of making sure that the content and content objectives and the ESL objectives um, are clearly stated, but how they're implemented, um, so that there's a balance and that all of the students are serviced, so that there are some students who are stronger than others, and they're doing pretty well, but the other ones are, you know, they're a challenge. They're doing well, but I mean they're being challenged. So I think that's the thing that I see, and then my concern is the CASAS test, because they use that primarily to evaluate the students and their readiness, and it's not in my mind. It doesn't seem like it's strong enough for
Mm.
uh, understanding the foundational skills, because it's only for reading, and in language there are so many other foundational skills that need to be at the ready so that they could then um, take in the content and be successful.
Right, right. Thank you, Kathy. And Jacqueline, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so currently, our students' CASA scores need to be at 207 or above. So that's like an intermediate low level.
Mhm.
But we find that a lot of students, a lot of students are good test takers or they're guessing. We don't know how their scores are that, and then they come to class and their language is acquisition is very low. It's very
Mm.
hard for them to understand, and they're still trying to, they're trying to use translators, and we're like, no, you've got to get away from that. You've got to, pick up this language in order to move on to the next course, because if you're just using that translator as a crutch, you're not going to have that when you go to take your certification exam. So
Right.
that's the difficulty that we're finding.
Yeah. So thank you so much for all that for that clarity and et cetera. I I don't want to be a spoiler to an upcoming story that also connects to CASAS as well. But so I'll focus on the assessment at intake question specifically here. I think working backwards is something that you might want to consider. In the professional learning community world, we talk about what do we want our students to learn and how do we know when they've learned it. But the what do you want your students to learn, that's like, what is the knowledge and skills I need students to come away from my IET program having, right? And then there's also what is the knowledge and skills I need students to already have to get into my IET program, right? And so what I'm hearing is that you're finding that the CASAS assessment is not giving you the full picture in terms of being able to support your students. But we know for accountability purposes, you do have to CASAS test them. You have to pre and you have to post test them. So you can't really get around that. But that doesn't mean that that's the only way you can assess on intake. That doesn't mean it's the only tool you can use to assess upon intake, right? And so really thinking about what is most beneficial. I think starting out at intermediate low makes sense on paper. But like you just said, when we start getting in there, sometimes they test at intermediate low, but they're not necessarily actually an intermediate low student, right? And so it does make sense to have a different testing tool or process in order for you to assess these other skills and thinking about that in context. We're also getting some really good some thoughts in here in the chat. One was just about which CASAS assessments that someone else was using, but Maureen said maybe using CASAS reading and listening, and then have them have an oral and writing assessment as well. And I would also add into that for IET, if you can also assess their math ability, that's going to be really important because a lot of those industry certification exams aren't just reading based, they're also mathematics based. And a lot of times the reading issues do connect to the math problems. So for example, if they have reading comprehension skills, they might get hung up on the math word problems. But if they don't know how to do basic math either, they're going to have issues regardless. So just thinking of other ways that you can assess. Amy asked in the chat, have you considered adding some other elements to your intake process to assess? We're in each other's heads all the time, Amy. So yeah, just thinking about what other components. So for example, if we're not talking about literacy and numeracy, what if the student were really struggling with technology and it's a technology-based program, right? You would want to assess their digital literacy skills at intake to make sure they're a good fit for that program or to see what else do they need to get ready for that program. And I hear what Kathy's saying also about the students who are more advanced are doing pretty well. The other students are doing okay, but she wants to see them do a bit better. And I think just reinforcing that support, thinking about something that we had available for our students was lab hours. And lab hours weren't just for our technology classes. If students were struggling with reading and math, they can get tutoring support during lab hours as well. So that was just, and that was something they didn't have to do. But our students who were struggling had a tendency to be more often to show up to lab to get that extra help. And we offered it in the morning and in the evening to accommodate students' schedules and things like that. But really think about what are the skill gaps you're seeing, I would say, as your students are coming in, like you talked about the reading and speaking piece, but then also what else can we do to assess that? Do we need to have a higher level of assessment? Do we need to supplement something else? Those type of things and think through that. Anybody else in the group want to add anything to here? Thank you, Maria, for that reminder. There was a really great uh, I think it's great, article or research report on promising practices for supporting beginning level learners within your IET programming. And one of the things that's highlighted in there is bridge programming, like helping students get a bridge to the IET program and making sure they're getting contextualized instruction, they're getting that introduction to the career and all that kind of stuff, but they're also getting that literacy, numeracy, speaking, hearing, listening, writing, etc. They're getting all that in the part of the bridge program, so they're better prepared. So that might be something else for you to think about. Is there a pre-class needed for the students before they get into the IET program to help them be ready? And it doesn't have to be something crazy long. A lot of these, there's bridges, there's boot camps, there's different things that programs do to help students get what they need and provide it. Other thoughts, questions, or suggestions?
I've just felt like there should be a greater connection between the existing EL classes, that they should be more knowledgeable about what
Mm.
are the expectations for these
Yes, that is
students.
a really good point, Kathy.
Because I think that if they had that and it was kind of like built in as they went along, then they might be more prepared.
Yeah, what Kathy's talking about is the vertical alignment between classes. If the student is going to be in an IET program, but they're coming from an ESL class, making sure those ESL teachers understand what the students need to be able to do before they advance to the next level so that everybody's kind of in alignment. And that doesn't mean that ESL teacher is completely versed on how to teach IET programming and to be the IET teacher, but that they know what the learning expectations are for the student for them to progress into the program and making sure that they can check those boxes as well. So just sharing whether it's a list of competencies that students should have, what reading level should they be at, what college or career readiness standards should they be able to hit in order to get in there, that kind of thing. So yeah, just not solely relying only on that CASAS pre-test to see what all they know, but also leaning into others. Go ahead, Amy. I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Kathy, were you talking about the alignment between like within the IET between the ESL teacher and the CTE teacher, like the two instructors for this particular program, or more generally like what Sudie's talking about, which is the alignment and the knowledge that gets shared across programs?
Uh, yes, I think the alignment that gets shared across programs, because I think that's really at the heart of the success of what happens with these classes.
Right.
If that's missing, then it's not there, because currently the two teachers that are doing our courses collaborate with each other and talk to
Hmm.
each other. And
Right.
I have gone to see those classes, and I see how they blend in uh, their strategies into teaching the content. So,
Yeah.
but it's when you see the some of this, as Jacqueline said, some of the students struggling, you could tell
Yeah.
that that's from previous experience. You know what they lack,
Mm.
Yeah.
and
So,
those
yeah.
foundational skills.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if I have a few thoughts, one is, any class has strong students and students that are, not as strong. Like in all of us who have been teachers, like in anything we've taught, whether it's adult ed or college level. Um, and so one thing is, just like what is the plan that your IET program has put into place for differentiation, for just-in-time support, right? Like, how are you catching those folks early and providing them with what they need? One way that we did that at LaGuardia, because we did have, stronger students and students who were struggling more. And interestingly, the students who were struggling more weren't always our adult ed and ESL students, right? Sometimes it was students who didn't have the best study habits or who had inconsistent attendance. They could have been our high on the assessment, our high level students, but they weren't keeping up with the coursework for whatever reason, right? So, or it was like a behavioral more than academic, right? What we did do in the LaGuardia program was we had basically every week we kind of assessed where students were they submitting the work, were they doing well? And if they weren't, we had a support, it wasn't really a tutorial, but it kind of turned into that. It was like a support class that was scheduled every week, but students who got flagged had to go to it, right? So it was either the hour before class or the hour after class. Um, and it was just kind of a just-in-time way because the pacing of our IET programs was so intense and the content was so dense that if they fell behind by a week or two, they almost could never catch up. So, so that's just another kind of just-in-time differentiation that we put in place with our programs.
All right. Thank you so much, Amy. And thank you, Roland, for sharing your challenge story with us. And I'm going to pass the ball back to Amy and Fremont.
All right. Thanks, Sudie. So Connor, Lakshmi, and Rimu, welcome. I see you guys. So I'm going to read the story and then we'll turn it over to you guys for more context. So Fremont launched an office assistant IET program, but faced confusion when CDE changed its classification from workforce training to workforce prep after it had been approved, right? And we've had a little bit of this talk here in this group about that. This created planning and communication challenges for the school. By connecting with another agency at the clinic, they found a solution, which is they restructured the course as the first step in a broader administrative pathway, aligning with CD's expectations and providing students with a clearer route to advanced skills and better jobs. So the questions that this situation is raising is, how have you navigated situations where external changes require a shift? What strategies have helped you minimize that disruption? So we all have that in our work lives right now. Things are constantly changing. So in terms of IET, has that happened to you, and kind of what strategies are you using? And secondly, what approaches have you found effective for designing career pathways? So this idea of Fremont building a much bigger administrative pathway for the students. So first, I want to turn it over to Connor, Lakshmi, and Rimu to provide a little bit more context or to talk a little bit about any challenge that they're facing right now or question that they have.
Yeah, so we launched our office assistant program like spring 2024, like pilot, and then really had like the big on-ramp for IET, had a number of students. We offered like the incentive to co-enroll between our ESL support and the class. And then like 2 months in, it was, oh, we've changed it. Oh, this might be workforce prep now. So it truthfully was really frustrating. It happened mid-year after we already had kind of relied on some different funding sources, right? Especially like a co-op that does pay for a good portion of that incentive we offered them. So it was frustrating, but what we did was they didn't really kind of clearly say, hey, you need to have a new class. They would, hey, we need like this many certificates. So we would just keep adjusting, but I feel like they just keep hammering down on different aspects of our program. So it was in the first meeting we had here, I was speaking to another school, and they said, oh, our consultant hasn't had a single issue with our pathway. So I looked at their website, and oh, it's the first step in multiple classes. So it was sort of like a light bulb moment for us. I mean, I'm not saying they like endorsed us and say, hey, please come steal our program, and we're not trying to steal, but okay, this needs to be the first in a sequence, was kind of our takeaway.
Yeah. So So, I mean, so Connor, yeah, that's super frustrating, first of all. And we know that the policy, which I think we're going to share in the chat, yeah, the IET at a glance guide that you're probably all familiar with, but if you're not, it's important for you to take a look at it, is what Connor and Fremont are referring to, which is California Department of Ed gave a much better clarification of what was considered workforce training versus workforce preparation. And Sudie and I like to say that if your IET has to lead to a new job and a better job. And if you don't know what that job is and you can't articulate it to the students, that's kind of the first place to start in your design, right? Which is what is the job that the students will be getting when they complete the IET. But what Connor's talking about is another piece of IET, which is um, that it has to be embedded as part of a bigger career pathway, right? And that it sounds like, Connor, what you guys discovered, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you guys were really doing kind of the intro level training, and that it may have not been enough to get somebody a job, but if you hook them into additional training and certifications, it's that stackable credentials. Did I get that right?
I mean, it was sort of like in between, and I guess if you're in between workforce prep and workforce training, you're more workforce prep. I view it as like a step up of some of the other workforce prep classes we've offered, but either
Yeah.
way, yeah, that's what it's going to become, is those elements that aren't workforce prep will have as the second class.
Right. And this is really around office assisting, and I'm assuming like technologies like Microsoft Suite or those kind of things. Sudie's raising her hand.
Yeah, because my screen sharing doesn't let me actually do the hand raise function. Um, but I think what this is calling out is I'm really glad that that Fremont shared this because I think it's something that helps us have an avenue to make a really important distinction. And that's what exactly Amy is talking about can they get the job? Will that job provide a life-sustaining wage? And what was hitting and people were struggling with last October when this was coming out was that there wasn't really a policy about what defines workforce prep and what defines workforce training until this came out. And then so some things that counted previously didn't count anymore. But what I've been thinking about and what helps to think through it is can you get a job at that certificate alone? So for example, you can go through OSHA training and get an OSHA certificate, but can you get a job with only an OSHA certificate? No, you have to have some kind of other trade certificate to go with it. Is it important to know Microsoft Office or Google Suites? Yeah. Can you get a job only knowing Microsoft Office and Google Suites? No, because that's not enough of a skill, depending on where you are. So that's why things like Microsoft Office Specialist no longer count as workforce training because you can't get a job just because you know Excel. Now, if you did Microsoft Office Expert and you're now writing the macros and you're coding and you do these other things, you can get a job with those skills, right? And so that's where the distinction really is. And I think that's what threw people for a loop. They're like, wait a second, this counted before. But I think the important thing to think about is, can I get a job with this skill alone? If not, then I need more. But if I can, then I'm okay. And so I think that's where people, and a lot of the office front office, the office programs ran into this exact thing that you're talking about, Connor, last year. I think both cycles of IET Clinic last year had folks that were doing some type of office program and trying to figure out how to massage it so it would take them to the next level. And that could be like adding in QuickBooks so they can do accounting practices, like all kinds of things of that nature. But it's like really that, can I get a job with just this thing that you really want to think about as you're thinking through these? Go ahead, Graciela. I see you've got your hand up.
This is exactly. So, Connor, I guess my follow-up question to this is so then that class was the prep, or it's the first in a series of classes to get this certification? Was that your workaround? And I guess that goes to Sudie's as well, because that's our ag tech program. It would be the first of a series to get this certification.
I think an important thing to think about is IET is supposed to lead to a life-sustaining wage job. That doesn't mean you're providing every part of that pathway, right? But what you are providing, if you're counting it as IET, has to include some skill, some training that can get them into a job. That doesn't mean that you're providing everything. So, for example, we've seen K-12 adult schools that are offering the ESL component while they're partnered with the community college to do the CTE component. And they're both getting WIOA 243 funding because they have an articulated IET pathway that then moves further into the credit-bearing classes, et cetera. So there's lots of creative ways to create IET pathways. I wish you guys could have been at Carolyn Zachary's CCAE session last year because she had this really great graphic on the screen where it showed like bridge program, you know, like that beginning level ESL, intermediate low, et cetera. And then it gets into the next level, which is where they're doing actual IET. They're still getting literacy training, but they're also getting the workforce prep and the workforce training. And then it moves into the next level where they're no longer doing literacy training. Now they're focusing fully on career training. So you can have the series like Connor's talking about. And if you happen to have the capability to do a whole program all in one campus, which typically only happens in college campuses, great. But if you're a K-12 adult school, you can work with your college to identify, okay, what program are you offering? How do I get my students into your program? What can I offer? What can you offer? Can I do IET, the beginning of this pathway in-house here, and then transition them to the next step of the pathway? But the important thing is at every step, articulating where is that workforce training happening? What skills is a student exiting with that will get them the job? That doesn't mean it's every job. Like you might be CNA for you all, and the next step they're going to a nursing program, right? They're not doing the whole thing, the whole enchilada right there with you.
So I have a question on that. So not on this. So another thing that they kind of were frustrated with is like, hey, one of the external partnerships was like with a school, right, for office assistant, which, okay, yeah, I get it. That's not quite an external partner. One of the IET programs we're exploring is for paraprofessional. It seems like a need in our area, and there's all these openings. And we had neighboring school districts who want to partner with us. But then I've been told it can't just be training for a school. It needs to be training that can be applied anywhere. But that's
So,
like a
so
school-based
yeah,
role.
yeah. So Connor, first of all, like uh you're uh, I want to say a few things, which is if if uh if you have real specific questions or things are coming up with your consultant, one great thing is you guys are going to have a coach come January. And that coach is really going to be able to dig into with you guys about what some of those conversations are and maybe help with some of that like clarification and facilitation, right? Like, because it sounds like you guys are coming up with ideas, but you're meeting with some frustrations about what may or may not work or what may or may not be approved. And so some of this is going to get worked out in the details. And that's kind of one of the great things about having a coach come January, right? So we can't obviously, um, Sudie and I can't really speak to what CDE will approve and won't approve, right? But the coach will be able to help uh, you understand maybe how other paraprofessional programs that are approved are running, right? There are many now in California that are approved and are very successful. So seeing how they're doing it, I think, is a great thing that you can get from your coach right away. And we can even try to maybe connect you, Connor, with some of that earlier on, like before January. And Sudie's writing to you in the chat, Fremont. So I want to make sure that we can get to our last um, discussion because I feel like it kind of touches on a lot of what we've talked about. But before we do that, does anybody from Fremont want to add anything or any of our colleagues on this call, in listening to what Fremont has shared, is there anything you want to add or a question that you have that you could put in the chat? Lakshmi or Rimu, did you guys want to add anything?
Nothing from my side. I think Conrad summarized it very well. Thank you.
Okay, great.
All right, we will go to the last one. I do want to call out that Maria put a bunch of really great resources in the chat. One is a healthcare bridge semester lesson plans and writing that's from Women Employed, which they have a lot of really great lesson plans and stuff, but that one's specific to healthcare. And there's two of those. And then there's one from CUNY that it's also focused on career kits for high school equivalency and ESL learners. And those are really, really great resources. So grab those, bookmark them, just so you know that they're in there. All right, so moving on, Napa Valley was not able to be with us here today. I don't think I see Emma Laurel or Nieves, but they did submit their challenge story, and I thought it was a really good one, so we decided to include it. So their story was, we offer an instructional assistant IET program designed to help students pass a three-part exam in math, reading, and writing, which qualifies them for instructional assistant positions in local organizations. Our program includes workforce training and ESL support for students who need it, while COAP 70.7 curriculum aligns with our course objectives and helps students develop writing skills. We've noticed that ESL students with the written portion of the IA exam more than native English speakers. The main challenge is that the writing skills required for COAP 7.7 do not match the higher level writing skills needed for the IA exam. We're working with CASAS to develop a new COAP tailored for IA and paraeducators working with K-12 students, aiming to better prepare ESL students for the rigorous writing tasks required for employment. Now, part of the reason I got a giant grin on my face when Connor mentioned paraprofessional earlier was because I had already seen this story and I knew they were working on a co-op for that. And I was like, this could help them. So this is really great. Their two questions were, how do you assess writing demands of your IET program in the industry certification exam? And the second one was, how do you build rigorous writing into your IET curriculum? Amy says in the chat, Fremont, this is a oh, again, we're in each other's brains. This happens a lot. I'm sorry. So what are you all thinking? So when you think about writing demands, and I just want to preface this with that they did mention that they will be reviewing the recording. So they are going to see your responses to their questions. So please don't feel like you can't answer the question because they're not here. So how do you all currently assess the writing demands for your IET program? What are you all doing? Or are you guys like, I don't know, I can't wait till this new collab comes out? Nothing? Okay, what about the second one? How do you try to ensure rigor within writing within your IET program?
Sudie, I can just add some
Go
to
ahead, Kira.
it. So normally, like what is the standard of writing? We have ELL language acquisition going on.
Mhm.
But if you are in adult education, what is the long-term goal is moving the students to community college or workforce. So how I do it is I take the GED standard of writing and use that because it is, CCRS aligned with everything. And so you kind of use the pre-GED and GED curriculum for the writing because eventually, whatever the demands are for the IET writing, and if you're operating at that grade level, which is in between 8th through 12th grade level, you are going to pass your test. And overall, students do fare well.
Very great, very good example, Kira. Thank you. Thank you. And I feel like her example is probably way easier than what the convoluted way we did things. We didn't have
Because
an IET clinic back in my day. But I think like one of the things that we did, we added in a business math and a business and a business reading class, workplace math and workplace reading. And one of the things we did in the workplace reading class, because it wasn't just focused on reading, it was also focused on writing and literacy, et cetera, was having them practice doing writing assignments, whether it was responding to specific workplace specific prompts and examples of things you could experience. And then every now and then we do something fun, like read a short book and write a narrative telling me what you think about that. And when they'd be like, why do I need to be able to do that? I was like, because you're going to get a really long email someday and you're going to have to be able to decipher that and let someone else know what was relayed. And so sometimes reading something that you might not find that interesting can be helpful. They actually did. The book was Brave New World. They loved it. But we had all kinds of different ways to incorporate writing. And where I actually got that idea is I was sitting at our high school convocation and we had a meeting with the CTE teachers and they were talking about the CTE teachers helping with writing and literacy by doing prompts and activities that really lean into writing. That way, the CTE teachers were also assessing and reinforcing writing and reading skills within their CTE programs. And they weren't really talking to me, the K-12 adult school teacher. They were talking to the high school CTE teachers. But I was like, ooh, this could apply to me too. I can do this as well. But I also like Kira's idea of leaning into what do they have to know to get the GED? Because if they have those skills, which are CCRS aligned, and you guys know I love standards, then we know that they'll be able to move forward. So I think that's great. Amy mentioned backward design is critical. What do students need to be able to know and do to pass the paraeducator exam? How are we scaffolding and contextualizing instruction in the IET programs? So when students get to the exam, they are ready. Normally, I would not read everything Amy types, but since Napa's not here and may not read the chat, I want to make sure they know what Amy's comment was. But that's also really, really great example and really thinking about, and I'm a firm believer in what is it that we want our students to know, like really thinking about the end goal when designing everything else. What are those essential knowledge and skills? What is the single set of learning objectives and how do you teach to those appropriately once you've developed them? All of those kind of things. So I think that backwards design and backward planning is super critical, not just in IET, but in general instruction. Like you want to make sure your students are acquiring the skills that you want them to exit with. So making sure you're teaching those are important teaching skills in general, but it can't be skipped in IET because you have to contextualize for these things, right? So you need to know what those things are. Um, Thank you so much. I thought did we have any more writing resources that we wanted to add in the chat, Maria, here? I can't remember. I know we
Those are
were.
the ones above, Sudie.
Oh, that's right. So the CUNY Career Kit one has additional writing materials and stuff like that. And it's not only for healthcare. I know the ones too directly above it are healthcare specific, but that one isn't just healthcare. It's so many different career pathway resources that are included there. And then Maria just reposted it for us. So those are there for us as well. Any other thoughts that you all are having about co-ops? This is not to be a shameless plug for CASAS or anything like that, but when you find that your co-op that you have isn't meeting your needs,
Yeah.
you can create new co-ops. Do that if you're finding it's not working for you. I think it was really great and bold of Napa to be like, this isn't working for us. And then they reached out to CASAS and started working with them to create a brand new co-op. CASAS is always asking folks to create new co-ops. And so be encouraged to do that if you're finding that something doesn't work for you. But I would also keep an eye out for this one that they're working on with Napa, because, once it's created and it's out there, anybody can use it. So that'll be something available for you all as well. Other thoughts or comments, Amy?
I just wanted to add
Go
about
ahead, Kathy.
writing. Writing is, the one of the four domains. And
Mm-hmm.
so within your teaching, that should be something that that teachers should integrate, by having them. And I think somebody suggested before, giving them a problem or something that they have to write about that
Mm-hmm.
is, within the context, content of the instruction. And it's also teaching, and you're getting to teach them syntax.
Mm-hmm.
Practicing language by writing um, is it's a slower process than just doing it. When someone asks you something and you have to come up with the answer, and by writing, you're able to construct your thinking into writing by using appropriate syntax. So I think it's very, very important that that happens within the instructional day and
Yeah.
lesson as it goes along. But it has to be, we have to look at those four domains and make sure that we integrate them in all of our lessons.
Yeah. And what's interesting about what you just said, I mean, you're right on the money, especially for our English language learners. I totally agree. But I think it's important not just for our English language learners. It makes me think about that no wrong door that Amy was talking about earlier. Everybody needs to have strong reading, writing, speaking, listening, and numeracy skills, right? Everybody needs to be able to do that to be successful. But often, and this is the second conversation this week I've had with a group of people that were focusing on writing. And you'd be surprised when people are like, well, we're focusing on reading, speaking and listening, but we're not focusing as much on writing, or we're doing CTE, but we're not really leaning too much into writing. But then you get into high school equivalency classes, they're leaning into the writing because they kind of have to, because it's part of the GED, right? So just thinking about the important life skill to have, it's an important workforce preparation skill, being able to write. It's an important not just workforce preparation, being able to communicate is a workforce preparation skill. So writing is a form of communication. So that's also important. Also thinking what the one thing you just said really struck me, Kathy, which was that it's much harder to write than it is to just speak and listen. I'm learning Spanish, as some of you already know that work with me. And I'm terrible at it, but I'm learning. But I've found like when I'm really so proud of myself and I can say it, I can hear it, I know what it is. But then I have to write out a sentence and I'm destroying it. Like I'm doing so badly and I'm misspelling words. And it is much harder, right? And so it helped me understand like, geez, these ESL students are like rock stars to be able to do these things while I'm muddling through like level 14 Spanish. Like it's not great. Go ahead, Maureen.
Just forgive my ignorance because we're just barely beginning our program. But you had mentioned like, can I get a job with this skill alone? So
Mm-hmm.
it is the IET. In my mind, the IET class is preparation for the actual medical assistant class, right? Or the actual pharmacy.
No.
No, it's not. Okay.
No, you're referring to a bridge program.
Okay.
So your IET program, the goal of IET, especially if you read the WIOA legislation, is to provide career pathway access to workforce credentials, and access to a life-sustaining wage. What you just described, if it's the thing that gets them to the workforce training, that's a bridge program. In an
Okay.
IET program, they're doing workforce training while also getting the other skills. So typically our IET students are not the beginning level students. That's where they're usually on a bridge program on ramp of some type, but it's our higher level students. IET can be the first part of a pathway, but it's not the entry to the pathway. You might want to have contextualized ESL or contextualized ABE before they get in there, but it does need to be leading to a life sustaining wage job and the credentialing. And the IET program itself should provide at least some credential that they may be stacking onto later to get higher levels credentials, etc.
So it's as if they're going to the say the pharmacy tech class, but they just have extra support.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly right. Hmm.
So they're the same kind of they're going to get the same certificate as the regular pharmacy tech
Yeah.
students,
Hmm.
but they just have extra support.
Yes, that's
Okay.
exactly right,
For some
Maureen.
reason I thought it was like a prep class, and then after they get finish it, then they actually go to the pharmacy tech class or
Yeah,
whatever
and
other class.
Maureen, it's interesting you say that because I think before the policy came out last year, a lot of programs that were more preparation for the pathway were previously approved, and then they were disapproved and had to fix themselves. And I know Connor raised them, but Connor was like one of very many that went through that same cycle and process. He was not an island of one, but it was because of that, that previous approval as they're trying
Hmm.
to work through the policies and et cetera. But the bottom line is, according to the, federal policy of which the WIOA Section 231 or 243 funding is attached to, it should be connecting to actual career credentialing. And so that's where that big thing is. And sometimes, and you can get around that by providing a program that has a lot of robust things that you can prove can place someone in a job. So, for example, Prayer Pro certification is not recognizable at every district in every part of the state, right? But if you can demonstrate that your students are getting all the parapro skills that they need to be a solid paraprofessional, then they can still get that job. That's a solid IET program.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem. All right, I am going to now stop talking and pass it to Adria for wrap up.
Thank you, Sudie. I had to struggle for my mute button, but there it is. So anyway, thank you so much to everyone for such, if I look starstruck, just the level of sharing and the level of conversation today has been incredibly rich, and we all appreciate and benefit from it. I hope that everyone else is feeling that, but I'm taking the liberty of speaking on behalf of us all, I think. So, as we come to the end of our time together today, I'd like to just take a moment, first of all, to reflect on what we've shared and learned from one another. So maybe if you don't mind, share with us in the chat, what is one next step that you'll take based on what you learned today? And I'm going to add another little question to the mix here. You might have something to say there. And or what is one question that you might still have? We actually have had a chance to answer and engage on a lot of these questions today. But if there are questions still lingering, please feel free to share any of those questions in the chat. We may or may not have the opportunity to talk much more about them today, but we can certainly always continue this conversation in Moodle, in those discussion boards that we have, and or at our next session when we'll have lots of additional time together. So I'm going to pause here and just give you a chance to type something in the chat. And again, while you're doing that, I just want to thank everyone for your sharing today. It's been so powerful. I see from Connor a next step about gathering questions to ask your coach. That's great. Be thinking of those now because your coaches are going to be so eager to share, to hear from you. That's actually where I already know where our coaches are really going to be wanting to start in listening mode with you. They're going to be on hand at our final session to hear from you about what your plans are at the outset of your coaching. But even when you meet with them to get started, they're really going to be wanting to hear from you where it is that you're going. And while we're there, I do just want to take another moment to thank Juan, Jennifer, and Kira all for joining us for this session today. They also are very, sort of pre-curious about where things are headed for your teams. And so they were very enthusiastic about the opportunity just to hear your challenges from you in this setting and joining this conversation. So thanks to them for being with us today and then for the sharing that they've done both on mic and in the chat along with the rest of the group. I see some other items coming up in the chat, reaching out to other teams, diving into that at a glance guide. It's a great resource, Graciela. I think that's a great one to just keep at the ready. Literally, it's at a glance, but it's brief and easy to navigate and really does provide a very useful resource. Incorporating a hybrid component, I see. I love, some of those ideas that were shared about front loading and balancing the work, thinking about different ways to just address these challenges. So, and again, reaching out to more programs. So keep those coming in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go to our next slide. And just say again, the next time that we will meet will be for our virtual session 2, which will be our final session of the clinic. That's scheduled for Friday, January 16th. So please make sure that's on your calendar. If it's not already, I think that it is. But we will meet that day from 9 to 2 Pacific. And this will be another what we call full day session with time for stretch breaks and lunch built in. The team assignment that's associated with that session 2 will be your capstone project, and we'll review that again together on the next slide. But before we go there, though, I will pause here just to mention that those team assignments that are listed in the right-hand column, as well as the various individual tasks and assignments in Moodle, are all designed to support your collaboration with your team throughout this clinic and to, support that work that you're doing to advance your team's IET goals, plans, needs, etc. And actually, to identify and articulate those so that you can advance. So if there are any tasks or assignments there that you haven't had a chance to tackle yet, it's not too late. There are several weeks remaining between now and our final virtual session. And so we just leave that all there for you. So moving on then to just take another moment to revisit this slide about your capstone project. You've seen this one before, of course, and the details are in Moodle for you. But as we've mentioned, the capstone project will be a presentation that's divided into 3 different sections. There's an administrator section, an instructor section, and then a section that addresses challenges, successes, and next steps for your team's implementation process. This presentation will take place on January 16th, but we'll ask you to share your slides for that by January 12th. So the session's on Friday. We'll ask for those slides by Monday, and that'll be, again, something that you'll submit there in Moodle. But that'll give us a chance, of course, to build it into our slides and resources for that final session day. All right, it is right on 2:15, so I'm pleased to bring this plane down for a soft, hopefully soft, smooth landing together. And again, just thank everyone for all of your sharing today, for your attendance, for your engagement, and all of the good things. We are always delighted to have this time with you and always feel so energized by it. And we will land there. I do see one more question in the chat. Can we request to go last? Oh, okay. Well, we can come back to that. I'll read that. I'll follow up with you. But for the sake of the group and for ending on time, thanks again. Happy December. Happy holidays, whatever holidays you might celebrate in December. And we will see you again together in January. Thanks so much, y'all. Bye-bye.